The neutrality of thought and its ability not just to be misappropriated, but actually itself be used and mobilized to help people go out and commit atrocities, whether that's in the form of religious violence, national ethno-violence, even philosophy itself gets used here, or poetry. These are all like psychic stances that allow us to go out and do terrible things and then come home to our families, give them a hug, and have the reason I did that terrible thing enshrined in a mode of thought. So all of that is really tricky to break down, and you only can do that, and I do mean like you only can do that with a critique of ideology. The critique of ideology is about breaking down the psychic stance in order for you to think XYZ thing, basically. The actual position. So not just what it says about itself, but the stance from which you actually can say those things. So critique of ideology is the meeting of Marxism, of psychoanalysis, and German idealism or Hegelian subjectivity. And that's the discovery of Slavoj Žižek, putting these three things together. So what this avoids is the problem of there being no meta-language, no stance from which you can, from the outside view everything. So critique of ideology is about viewing our own position. So we can critique other ideologies, but ideology is something that's viewed as ours. It's not just imposed upon us as this outside thing. It is not the authoritarian ideological state apparatuses where we are hailed and we are told we are this thing. It's a thing that we need to engage reality itself. So the classic example of They Live with the glasses that allow us to see the aliens that are out there controlling us. The glasses aren't the ideology imposed upon us. They're the critique of ideology that allows us to see how our own vision is ideology. Our own experience, our own direct experience of reality itself uses ideological framing. It's a fantasy frame to put meaning into the world. So the easiest example was racism, like what you see when you see a person with this appearance. It's not just this neutral like stripes on skin. You're seeing someone who fits into a racial framing, whatever that is. So to mass mobilize people, you need to give them a fantasy framing, a way of organizing their enjoyment in the world, how they fall into things, how you lock in basically, and how we ascribe meaning, like what we see in the world. So ideology is that too, but it's doing that in the mode in which we give our freedom over. We stop the open responsibility we have ourselves in this struggle, and we give it over to our superegos. Like the superego locks in and says, I'll take your freedom, just view things this way. So like racism is the easiest example. If you just lock into that, you get reprieve from your own freedom, which is what we inherently want. And I'll just carry things forward. And that's what allows you to go out and do terrible things like, all of the terrors of racism or, genocide. So two main ways of organizing people is through the military and through religion, military / the nation state. So, and that's what Freud breaks down a bit in these two classic works. But with, our world, we're seeing the terrible, terrible consequences of this realized in new ways every day. So, like what allows the soldier to go out and commit atrocities. The latest one from the West Bank is a family was driving and the whole vehicle was shot up and the family was massacred. And then they took out the two children who survived and beat them and called them dogs and interrogated them ruthlessly. What allows a person to psychically do that? Because it's not this like misanthropic point of we all, like terrible people want to do these things. So you have to get to a point where you frame things in that terrible way and find enjoyment in massacring people, doing dark things for the state. So whether that's the state that I'm talking about, but I don't want to say the word because it'll get this video censored, or 1930s Germany, they're the same fucking thing. Like what allows you to psychically go out and massacre people, or you do it in the name of religion. With religion, it's about like the enemy figure and, what framing you get to ascribe who your enemy is and then go out and massacre them. So, that's jihad, that's crusade, that's a pagan, struggle against your neighbor. That's with Judaism, being the chosen people and then going out and massacring Amaleks or Palestinians. And that can be done in an atheistic sense, is what we're seeing today. So, there are philosophical insights to, let's stay with the example of being a chosen people, like as not a thing that makes you, arrogant and feel like you're better than other people, but as a thing that's undoing, being chosen by God, like being the pinpointed thing of God's desire, is philosophically interesting. It's not a thing to just throw out and to say it makes you therefore an arrogant person who massacres people. There are things to struggle with there. You just have to stay open and against the very negative, dark ways in which the superego pays off doing terrible things. The superego says, give over your freedom, and I'll give you a way you can go out and enjoy this stance while doing terrible things, massacring people. That's the thing to struggle against. That's the thing to fight. I think we're just prone to superegoic ways of being taken over, and that's, again, part of ourselves. Same thing with ideology. So in terms of the religion that says, just be kind, don't be a jerk, and then anything that's being a jerk is therefore, heresy, doesn't fall into the religion, betrays it. That's tricky too, because the superego can lock in there just as well. We see in our era signs that say, be kind, be effing kind of a thing. And that's very neutral, and it lends itself more towards the superego than not. That's the reason why we see those signs everywhere. The radical reading of that is we live in an era of open violence, where norms and politeness are being broken down, where the public space is being corroded and attacked, and we need to rigidly reassert simple norms of kindness. But when you do that through duty, we do it without nearly as much enjoyment as we do if we're doing it superegoically. The superego is the reason why these signs abound, why this be kind, be effing kind. That effing is the superego right there. No different from the superegoic fathers of David Lynch, like in Lost Highway, like drive, follow the rules of the road, kind of a thing. That's a deep enjoyment too, but it takes away our freedom, and it's just not. It's very tricky to mobilize people on kindness when we do things through duty and politeness. It's just as a genuine norm. It's part of the social fabric. So it's a very tricky thing to work with that material, especially as it's coming attacked and undone. So we just need to keep reasserting it neutrally. So that's why fiction is so important as philosophy. Fiction is a fantasy framing that takes us somewhere, takes us on a journey, and it shows us how to organize our enjoyment. And, there's, in good fiction, we lock in, not superegoically. It takes us to the radical conclusion, these positions of our thought. And, that's what I try to do in my work. That's what I stay invested in with other types of fiction as well. When you're, it's sort of like, having a song in your head and being like, yeah, I'm into it. But that's not necessarily superego. That's not simply giving your freedom over. That is finding your duty in certain modes, in certain stances. It's just this open thing. Like, where does it become ideological? Where does it serve the norms of things and keep things as they are, versus where does it actually break us into something new, break us into more universality, more connection with other people in our non-belonging, not this, gated community belonging structure, but, finding ways of not fitting in the structure of things and breaking past that. That's what's worthwhile.